For years, one of the biggest questions in world politics has sounded almost simple. Is the United States losing its global supremacy? But the answer depends on what we mean by decline. If by decline we mean collapse, the evidence does not really support that. If we mean the fading of the extraordinary, unrivaled dominance the U.S. enjoyed after the Cold War, that is much easier to argue. The real distinction is between absolute strength and relative position. America can remain enormously powerful while becoming less singular. That distinction matters because the language of decline often makes the world sound as if Washington is about to be displaced in every domain at once. Yet in real crises, governments, markets, and media still tend to look first to the United States. When wars break out, shipping lanes are threatened, sanctions are discussed, banking stress spreads, or a security guarantee suddenly matters, Washington remains central to a remarkable number of global control points. That does not mean it controls everything. It means many systems still run through American power, rules, institutions, and decisions. The clearest example is finance. The dollar remains central to trade, finance, and reserves. Much of the world still borrows, settles, saves, hedges, and prices through structures shaped by American institutions and legal frameworks. That is one reason U.S. sanctions can be so effective and so difficult to circumvent. Even states that want to reduce dependence on the dollar often discover how hard it is to replace the liquidity, confidence, and infrastructure behind it. Alternatives exist, but replacing an entire ecosystem is much harder than criticizing it. That leads to another advantage: capital markets. In times of uncertainty, money often moves into the United States, not away from it. Investors look for depth, liquidity, legal structure, trust, and safe assets, and U.S. markets still offer those at enormous scale. Demand for U.S. debt, despite repeated arguments about American weakness, tells us something important. People may worry about Washington, but when the global system is under stress, they still often treat U.S. assets as the place to hide. That is not a sign of a country in straightforward decline. The same pattern appears in innovation. The United States still combines world-class universities, research labs, venture capital, military research, immigration, market size, and the ability to scale new firms into global platforms. This is one of its deepest strengths, not just generating ideas, but turning them into systems used everywhere. American big tech companies are not simply firms. In many areas, they function like infrastructure, with influence over data, standards, cloud systems, software ecosystems, and digital habits across continents. That creates a kind of power that is economic, political, and cultural at the same time. Then there is hard power. The U.S. still has major energy production, unmatched long-range military reach, sea power, logistics, intelligence capabilities, nuclear deterrence, and a global basing structure. Those assets provide strategic breathing room. They also underpin parts of the wider order, from trade route protection to alliance reassurance. Two oceans and friendly neighbors reduce some of the security pressures that other great powers face. Geography still matters, and in the American case, it remains unusually favorable. America's network of allies is another crucial advantage. Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Canada, and other partners act as a force multiplier. This is one of the least appreciated forms of power. Not just what a state possesses itself, but what it can coordinate, legitimize, and mobilize through long-standing relationships. The contrast with China is important here. China has significant economic influence, but it still faces what could be called a network deficit. It has leverage, investment ties, and market weight, but not an alliance architecture comparable to that of the United States. Soft power adds another layer. American culture, universities, digital platforms, and the global role of English all extend its reach. So do resources, agricultural land, navigable rivers, a huge internal market, and geographic insulation. These are structural strengths, not passing advantages. They do not make the U.S. invulnerable, but they help explain why so many repeated predictions of imminent eclipse have not materialized. Still, the strongest counter-evidence should not be brushed aside. The United States has serious vulnerabilities. rising public debt, aging infrastructure, political polarization, social tensions, regional imbalances, deindustrialization in parts of the country, and difficulty sustaining long-term strategy all weaken its position. A superpower does not need to collapse to become less effective. If domestic division makes policy erratic, then external power becomes harder to convert into durable results. That brings us to an especially important problem: reliability. Many allies today do not mainly doubt American strength. They question American predictability. They wonder whether guarantees will hold, whether trade policy will swing sharply, and whether strategic priorities will survive domestic political turnover. Leadership in a global system depends not only on power, but on trust. If partners start hedging because they are unsure what Washington will do next, then U.S. supremacy becomes harder to sustain, even if U.S. capabilities remain immense. There is also the sheer cost of supremacy. Maintaining global security commitments, enforcing sanctions, supporting reconstruction, funding diplomacy, shaping standards, and protecting trade routes is expensive and politically exhausting. History warns that great powers do not only fail because rivals become stronger, they can also fail by taking on too many tasks at once. The burden of running parts of the international system can become its own form of weakness. And this is where China enters the picture most forcefully. China's main challenge to American supremacy is not that it has duplicated the entire U.S. model. It is that it has built broad industrial depth across major sectors and can direct capital and national priorities at scale. That can be highly effective in infrastructure and strategic industries. China's rise has also become increasingly strategic. Naval expansion, missile capabilities, space and cyber development, and efforts at greater self-reliance all matter. In the Indo-Pacific, this affects trade routes, semiconductors, alliance behavior, and regional rule setting. But China's rise also has limits. It faces aging and population decline, serious property sector problems, debt pressures, youth unemployment, and questions about how far innovation can flourish under tight political control. It also faces distrust from important neighbors, including Japan, India, Vietnam, and the Philippines. So while China is clearly the main challenger to U.S. supremacy, that does not mean it is on a smooth path to replacing the United States globally. India is often described as the next great balancing power. But that should be treated as uncertain potential, not settled fact. India has demographics, digital growth, a major diaspora, and favorable geography. Those are real assets. But whether India becomes a major global hub depends on improving education, infrastructure, job creation, legal reliability, and social cohesion. Its rise is possible, but it is not automatic. Demography itself needs caution. One common mistake is to treat Asia as a single demographic bloc surging in one direction. It is not. East Asia is aging rapidly. Much of the youth concentration is in India and parts of South and Southeast Asia, not evenly across the continent. And if we are thinking long-term, future population pressure may lie more in Africa than in Asia. Demography can reshape power, but only if we read it carefully and avoid turning very different societies into one statistical story. So what happens next? The honest answer is uncertain. Several trajectories are plausible. One is a world in which the United States remains the leading power but is less unchallenged than it was in the 1990s. Another is sharper U.S.-China bipolarity, with both sides organizing trade, technology, and security around competing blocs. Another possibility is broader multipolarity, with several major centers of power. And there is a darker path too: fragmentation into blocs, currency islands, technological walls, and competing standards that make the world more divided and less efficient. What seems most likely is not the disappearance of American power, but the end of the old unipolar moment. The United States may be losing a form of supremacy, especially the assumption that it can set the terms everywhere with little serious resistance. That is different from saying it is declining overall. In many of the most important domains, it remains exceptionally strong. But relative power is shifting. Rivals are adapting. Allies are watching more carefully, and the quality of American leadership now depends more than ever on alliances, institutions, trust, and reliability. So is the U.S. losing its global supremacy? In the old sense of unrivaled post-Cold War dominance, probably yes. In the broader sense of still being the central power in world affairs, not yet. The world is becoming less unipolar, and that means the decisive question is no longer just who is strongest, but who can build lasting confidence in an age of power shifts. Subscribe, enable notifications, and tell us in the comments what topic we should explore next.